So hi Alfie, how are you?
Hey man, how's it going?
It's been all right. It's been all right. Good day today. Before we get into your new album, Radiosoul, I'd like to jump back to your early days. Now, you started at a really early age recording your own music. What should I picture in these kind of yeah, first attempts at making music? What did they sound like?
Well, I was in this very messy room of mine,
Okay.
and at first, I guess I was, kind of doing everything on the spot, making it up, and I didn't really have any kind of rules to follow. I guess my love of like recording came out of listening to like other records. I
Mm,
was really intrigued by like, oh, how do they translate drums and guitars into like studio recordings? Like, there's no way they just
mm,
plug and play. Like, there's certain ways you have to do these things, right? So I kind of like downloaded GarageBand and like basically taught myself like basic production, and then eventually like kind of got better and started using Logic Pro and stuff like that when I was younger. But yeah, I guess for me it was like quite an unconventional way of doing things, which I like. If I listen back to my early stuff, I can still hear like how like the microphones didn't have stands. Like I just like balance them on like a table and like, hope they don't fall over, or I don't know, like my guitars would like start crackling halfway through a song. But those things kind of add to the whole vibe of it,
sure.
and I'm glad that happened. I think sometimes you actually need that to like just make the process more interesting and fun. So yeah, it was quite an unconventional way, but I just liked doing it that way.
You mentioned getting interested in producing. What was it about kind of playing with sound and playing with structure and textures and all that kind of thing that intrigued you? And do you have maybe an example of maybe a song that you dissected where you thought, well, this is just amazing how they kind of made these sounds
Um,
work?
well, it's weird because like obviously I make like indie pop music, but like when I was younger, the music that like I was really attracted to was like prog rock. So
Okay,
it was listening to Close to the Edge by Yes, where
okay.
heard all these, like weird different textures, like really crazy guitar playing, but then like all of these like droplets of weird synths that Rick Wakeman was playing and stuff like that. So I've just thought it was really interesting the way that all of these like things came together and somehow didn't sound like an absolute mess. And I thought that was really interesting. And it's a bit of an extreme example, but it meant if I studied that, then I could, get away with making pretty easygoing indie music as well. And it was also like Mac DeMarco, where I was just
Hmm.
like, I don't know, I loved the way how his like songs had so few little elements to them, but they just like glued together really nicely. And it was kind
Hmm.
of like the whole a less is more approach of it, which I was really intrigued by. So
From the outset, did you, because you picked up a couple of instruments at an early age as well, was it kind of a given that you would play a lot of those instruments yourself, especially early on?
yeah, I think I guess that came into like because I started off with like my mate Joss, who used to
Mm.
play like we used to like play guitar and drums, and we'd have a microphone in between us when we were like 7 or 8, and like we
Okay.
just record stuff together and then put it on CD. But eventually, I kind of I don't know, I fell in love with like yeah, like Mac DeMarco and like Todd Rundgren and like Tame Impala
Mm.
and Paul McCartney and Prince, and all of these people have the same thing in common. They were really good at just playing all the instruments themselves. So I thought, you know what? Why don't I try and do that? Because I really respect that, and I think there's something really whole about it if you could do that. So the first releases that I was putting out were all just me. Like I record all the instruments myself, like do drums, then bass, then guitar, then a little bit of vocals, then a few synths on top of it, kind of thing. Very basic stuff, but that's what I do for the first kind of like 2 or 3 years, and then as things progressed, I started working with other writers and producers a bit
Sure.
more. You know.
But then, in your teenage years, then, because I do find this interesting, I believe you at 16 or maybe even 15, you kind of start to release music professionally, right?
Yeah.
So at that age, what was the mindset and did it all feel overwhelming, or were you just gung ho and had all the energy in the world for it?
I think because I was super young at the time, I was quite naive, and
Mm.
it meant that I could kind of get away with like just making music and not thinking too much about it. Like, yeah, at the time I was like 15, and it's what it's what I was doing every day, anyways. Like I'd come back
Sure.
from school, and like school, I'd be back home from school at like 4 o'clock, and I'd just go into my bedroom and work until like 10 or 11 at night, just making a song,
Okay.
every day. Cause like it's just what I wanted to do. And in the middle of doing that stuff, that's when the label Chess Club picked me up and said, we really like what you make and stuff. And I just thought, well, that's great. I'm not really going to change anything then, because like they obviously like what I'm doing naturally. So I just kept
Sure.
making, during my GCSEs, like what you do when you're like 16 kind of thing. So yeah.
But what I find interesting then is, did anything change? Because you mentioned all the time you put in it, kind of being obsessively making songs, and then it becomes kind of part of your livelihood, part of, well, career is such a weird word to talk about.
Yes.
But you know what I mean, right? But there's a certain, I suppose, expectation at some point when labels get involved and stuff. So what was that transition for you then? As you also as just simply getting older in that time.
I think there definitely was a moment where everything changed. It was the third EP I made. Don't Go
Okay.
Wasting Time, it was called. And I think I made most of it, yeah, when I was like 16 kind of thing. And yeah, I was like two EPs down. And the first two I'd done mostly by myself. I had a little bit of help on the second one with Rob Milton, who did stuff for Holly Humberstone and like Easy Life, who's a
Mm,
legend. But anyways, the third record that I made was called Don't Go Wasting Time. And I think I naturally just went for a bit more of like a funky poppy sound rather than like a an indie Mac DeMarco Steve Lacy mix. And because I started implementing like little bits of indie pop into my music, I think as soon as I did that, and like the songs got more streams, the label was definitely like, oh, like you can write songs that like really get a lot of streams kind of thing. You like, oh, you can make pop songs that. So that's when I started doing more sessions kind of thing. And
sure.
then I did one with Justin from the Vaccines and a guy called Will Bloomfield, who's a legend himself. And we got in the room together and we wrote one of my biggest songs, Happiness in Liquid Form, together in like an hour.
Mm,
And
okay.
then that completely changed everything. That was it after that, like so.
Oh, that's awesome. And well, did you have any expectations yourself of what it would entail to be kind of a professional musician, or to do that kind of do the touring, do everything that is involved with music?
Well, I think I went into that side quite blind. I knew exactly what it would be like to release the music, and I was very prepared in terms of artistic evolution and
Mm,
like what my albums were going to be like, and I knew that I was going to adapt and grow. If everything went to plan. Um, the main thing I didn't really prepare myself for was like touring and being someone that I'm not famous, but like just like being slightly popular or whatever. Like
sure.
it was never something that I, expected in the first place. So when it came to me and when it kept growing more and more, um, at first I was cool with it, to be honest, because like during the pandemic, it was such a weird way of like being
Right.
popular. It was all on the internet, but you know, as we've gone back into like normal times, as you could
Sure.
call it, um, I feel like there's more pressure now, and like this album kind of talks a little bit about how um my it kind of goes back to my first album, and it's basically saying how like my first album had two very different lives because when I recorded it, I had so much time, because I was in the
Mm,
pandemic and I had all the time in the world to just like make things on my laptop whenever I wanted to. But after that, after all of the comfortableness had faded away, I was all of a sudden touring it and like talking to tons of people. And, we did like 100 shows. I met
oh, wow.
thousands of people. And, it was a complete 180 and it was something that I wasn't really prepared for. So, yeah, but it's never been like a pressure for me to like do better as an artist, I don't think. Or maybe
Okay.
there is slightly, but I think it's like it's a good kind of pressure. Like moving to London, there was kind of a pressure because there's so many amazing artists and musicians already in London. So the bar I think just gets naturally raised quite in a nice way though. So
Yeah, but as you mentioned, I think that's a kind of a good, healthy pressure to elevate your own output in a way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think moving to London definitely helped the way I wrote this album as well. So
But there are some difficulties in moving to a metropolitan area like London.
Oh,
So the song Beckham, what kind of is that the precipice of kind of just about moving to London?
it's a mixture, yeah. Like part of it is most definitely about that, and just like I don't know, it was quite a stressful time because like I obviously didn't live in London when I was moving there, so it meant that whenever I was going to go and check out places, then I'd have to like book a whole day of like flats to view and then go
Mm.
down on the train kind of thing. And I was very anxious with like, I'd never done it before. And my girlfriend kind of took the lead because like we had to like call all of these different agents and I'm terrible on the phone. And it's just like it was just a big mess, honestly. But it took months to actually find a place,
Okay.
because
And
it's
it's
London.
probably not unaffordable, right? London, it's crazy.
Oh, it's so expensive. Yeah. But you're there's a reason it costs money because it is amazing. It's such an incredible city, and you're paying for just the fact that you live in it, really.
Mm.
But yeah, you don't get much. Like it costs tons of money, and you have like a tiny little bedroom and half of a kitchen and a bit of land as a garden. So but yeah, no, it's yeah, that was like the list of places that I was looking to move to, and that was all mostly in Southwest London. So
And am I right in saying, because I believe when you started out, you also took a lot of inspiration from the stories of others. Listening to this album, it felt like it was very close to you. Am I right in saying that in terms of the stories you tell?
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that came quite naturally because it was quite an important time in my life, a very busy kind of erratic time in my life where things were changing, not just every year, but every day almost.
Mm.
Um, so that I feel like there was a lot to sing about in this album compared to like Mellow Moon, the one before, where, obviously I was stuck inside my bedroom for a year. So what do you really sing about there? Like, where do you go? You run a bit dry eventually. But yeah, with this album, I felt like I had a million different stories to tell.
Yeah, and do you treat, especially now, is it kind of like a diary in a sense where you can listen to a song and kind of immediately snap back to that moment?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's weird. I don't think they ever take me to one particular moment
Okay.
because the way I wrote the record was quite weird. It was like I'd do these diary entries, but then mix them all together. So
Mm.
like for example, Eyes Wide Shut, one of the songs on the album is like it's written about like a whole year of touring, then a whole year of coming off the road, and just talking about how in 2022 I was so busy, there's so much going on. So I just written down all these thoughts for the whole year. But then when I came off tour, I came back to a tiny little village where nothing was happening, and then I wrote down a bunch of thoughts for that. So it takes me back to a massive amalgamation of things, if anything.
But that's a very interesting point as well. Let's continue on Eyes Wide Shut. So that idea of kind of living dual lives in a sense, where when you're on tour, it's very intense and you're always doing something, you're always on the road and moving. And then, as you mentioned, you come back home. There's into a small town. There's nobody there. It's just quiet.
Yeah.
What is kind of the yeah? What are those two? I don't know the right word. The dichotomy between those two. What is that like?
Well, yeah, obviously, like touring is quite the adrenaline boost, and I feel like, especially when we had so many shows, like a third of that year was spent playing shows, let alone the days off and stuff.
Mm.
So naturally, I think you kind of, we started touring that year in March and finished in December, so we just went ham the whole year, and I think naturally you kind of just hold all the weight of it, like it all just kind of builds up until you kind of explode. And so, there was a lot of highs and lows. Like the traveling was crazy. The amount of traveling that we did on that year alone was just nuts. Like, some of the plane rides were like 24 hours and,
Oh wow.
how could you prepare for that, So, um, yeah, it was a lot of getting used to and a lot of just going in. I think it was good that I went in blind, but now it's just like, I don't know, like now I know what to do next time out of experience and stuff. So yeah, it was a big experience. Whereas like coming back home after tour, it's just we came back in December of 2022, so it means that I came back and it was like peak winter, and we'd just been in the States and it was like sunny and So it was quite the juxtaposition, really, like all of a sudden you're back at home where all you've got is like two churches, two pubs, and a shop.
Mm.
And, all you can really do is go on a walk, or like you got mates, but everyone's like spread out. And I couldn't drive at the time. So it was like, what am I going to do? And for like 2 months, I kind of just like, I was a recluse. So I just like stayed
Okay,
in my bedroom, under my like bed sheets, just like, I don't know, like resting for ages. And then eventually I got so like kind of fed up of just the mundane aspect of
sure.
it that I ended up going back to America to like write more music. So
Yeah, because I think that was written in the bio where that trip, that second trip to the US, I think that must have been then 2023, if I'm not
yeah.
mistaken. It kind of reignited your passion for production and kind of recording stuff. How so?
Well, it actually just made me realize that I shouldn't be focusing overly on the production myself.
Mm,
Because with the previous album, I was mostly producing it, by myself, and a lot of it was done just me. But I think after we'd toured those songs so much for like a whole year, and it was constantly shoved down my throat, that album. So
sure.
there comes a time where like eventually, I don't know, like after you've been campaigning an album for like a year, you're going to be a little bit fed up of it in some aspects,
Sure.
So I think I just wanted to get away from that. And I guess I came back home, yeah, from that tour, and I was trying to sit down at a laptop most days and trying to record music. But every time I was doing it, it felt like I didn't really have any new like plugins or patches or sounds that excited me anymore, and I didn't have any like musical gear. I didn't really know where to go. Like I didn't know where to go next. I was very confused about just what direction am I heading in. Like I guess like it was just quite a blur for me because like I was so immersed in that album that I couldn't really get out of that mentality. So
Mm,
what I did was I kind of accumulated some ideas that I had from going back to like 5 or 6 years ago. And that's where I started off basically. So I had these ideas. I had one called This Is Just the Beginning, and then another one that ended up being a song called Just a Dance.
mm,
And I took those two songs to America and worked with like two producers on them. And basically it was really good because it just meant that I could focus on just like the songwriting aspect of it and not worry too much about how I execute it in terms of production. And
sure.
it was interesting to me because obviously every producer that I worked with on the record had a different kind of way of producing the music, and they all had different sounds and different studios, and most of the studios were just in people's bedrooms as well. So I really wanted to keep it to like the same kind of way that I created music. I didn't really want to go to massive studios or anything. I still
Mm,
wanted to do it in a setting where I was comfortable and could be spontaneous about it and still feel like I was recording an album in a bedroom, but at the same time doing it with people that had new sounds and new sonics and new things that I could kind of bounce off of. So yeah, it just made the whole experience a lot easier for me because I felt like I had a second pair of ears the whole time, which was great.
sure. And I suppose it makes sense as well to see why the album is so diverse and because you were working with all these different people in different rooms with different equipment, as you say. So
Yeah,
that makes the album very, very fresh as well, I think.
it makes it fun for me. Like I don't know, like we delivered it like I guess August, September last year, and I still can just listen to it like every day and just like really love it, which is great.
But you mentioned Just the Dance just now. I mean, listening, hearing that song for you and knowing now Nile Rodgers is playing on that, that must be, I mean, crazy, right? So surreal in a sense.
It's so crazy. It still just blows my mind. And I was saying to someone else, like, it sounds like a Chic song to me. Like, I had to slightly unchic it because it was so chic, like when we put it together. But it's just, oh, it's so cool. Like, it's so cool that like my song that I wrote years ago has Nile Rodgers all over it.
I mean, yeah, that's just yeah, amazing to think about. But even you mentioned Will Bloomfield, I believe.
Yes.
"Hello Lonely" is the song you did with him, and I saw this clip on probably must have been Instagram or something, where you were kind of dissecting the sounds, and then you have that brass section, and then you then played that on the guitar, which is really cool, I think. But those kind of things, can you just talk a little bit about that ping-ponging of ideas with my Will.
Well, Will is great for that. Will's one of the best people to work with because you just go into the studio and he's already just really excited and really just down for anything. And I think he's a very grounding person in general because we make a lot of really good pop music together. I think he's the best person to make pop music with. Like we've made a lot of big songs together, like Happiness in Liquid Form, 3D Feelings, Broken, like just a lot of bigger songs that I've done, which is sick. And I don't know, like I go into the studio with him and the main thing is he always knows how to bring the vibe. So
Mm.
he'll already have like a really good drum beat going on and we can kind of build it together and make it even better. And then what he's so good at with doing is like keeping it poppy and fun and like addictive, but also adding in really cool musical elements.
Mm.
So he had that like crazy brass thing. And then I was like, oh, I'll just like warp it on guitar. I'll just like match it and yeah, and then like I don't know, like that song was actually recorded really quickly because like we
Okay.
were just like trying anything, and then weirdly enough, I don't know if you like Elbow the band, but
I know about them. I know about them.
yeah, because he Will shares a studio with Guy Garvey from Elbow,
Mm.
and
Okay.
Guy is a legend, but love him to bits. He's so cool, but he has all of these like cool little instruments in his studio that Will just uses as well because like they just share it. And he had this like organ, and I don't know if I don't know if you can hear it in the song, but there's this like stuttering organ that goes before like the chorus comes in. So we were like messing around with that, and it's a very small room, but like basically think of it as like a little square, and like every corner there's like a little instrument, and we'll just like mess around with all of them and just like layer stuff up. And that's what's so fun about like this album. I feel like throughout the whole record, it was just about like picking up anything we saw in the studio and just saying, why don't we do something on this? Like there's a bit of electric sitar on it. Like, I don't know, like there's so many random little things that like just add to the record, I think.
Oh, definitely. I think those kind of textures and just the little things that you perhaps on first listen don't even really notice. Those are really
Ah,
interesting. And like with that brass part, when I heard that for the first time, I thought I really had to think. It sounds like brass, but it doesn't really fit. So seeing you play that
yeah,
on guitar, it made a lot of sense. And those kind of things I find really cool. Um, if we think about, because you said Radiosoul has just a little bit more pressure perhaps than the previous album,
yeah.
and you're still so young, so this is maybe a question meant for later, but what do you want out of music in a sense?
Um, it's weird, isn't it? Like I never really thought about that going into it, like what I want out of it. I think I already was fulfilled by the fact I was making it and doing it. So
Sorry, let me rephrase it then. What do you get out of music?
that's a good question to be honest. Like I think it's mostly just the fulfillment that it gives me, and I guess it's almost like musical recycling. When I make an album, put it out, it inspires me to make the next one off the back of it.
Mm.
I think the reason I came into music was because I love studio recordings and I love just albums in general. And I don't know, the idea of just having a good run of records and like good album art. And there's such a fulfillment to that when it goes right. And I don't know, like the first time I held my first EP on vinyl in my hands, that's what I get out of it, basically.
Mm.
Like seeing my record and just seeing something that I made in my bedroom or I made with my friends and it's pressed onto a record. And just the idea that it came from here, it came from my brain, just it just blows my mind how music works. Like it all just came from a brain, but then it goes into your fingertips, you play it, you turn it into magic, you put it onto your computer, you translate it into waves that people will listen to. And I just love the process of it. I think it's one of those things that I still just pinch myself about because it's something that I think comes really naturally to me. So I can't even treat it as a job, because
Mm.
it's just such a pleasure for me to do it. And the fact that people go out of their way to like listen to my records or buy them, I think is just a very incredible bonus in a way. You know, it's not something that I initially wanted to, you know, for tons of people to like go out and buy my record. I just loved doing it because I loved like I don't know, releasing music on Spotify or
Mm.
Bandcamp when I was like a teenager and just seeing it being sat there and you know, seeing a discography kind of evolve. Like there was just something really satisfying and yeah, and just I don't know, like en enabling in terms of making music for
Mm.
me. Like, look at that. So yeah, I think it just yeah, there's just something that makes me feel really fulfilled about having a career out of music and you know building the bricks bit by bit. Like having this album out tomorrow, I'm so excited because it's just another piece of the puzzle, you know.
Yeah, the last question then, because you mentioned the word discography, and you're still so young, and yeah, already this is your second album. You have a bunch of EPs out. Um, in terms of songwriting, then, where do you see it going from here? Because you said you already, once you make an album, it already inspires you to make something new. So, in terms of songwriting, do you have any ideas already?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna take lots of different directions on the next one. I'd like to try more genres because like I tried a few different ones this time around that I hadn't tried before, like hyper pop and
Mm,
I don't know, like little bits of krautrock in like Beckham and stuff like that. But I'd love to mess around with like more industrial sounds and like garage rock and like maybe even
okay.
some ambient sounds and even some progressive rock and
Yeah, I was
like
gonna
plunge.
say, going back to those prog rock roots.
I think I'd like to do at least one song on the record where it's really proggy, you know, like try and attempt to get away with it, you know. But yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think yeah, the main thing is that I really want to start from scratch again, and I don't know how this album's going to go down with people, but I think it's like the best stuff that I've made. So I think there's more of a pressure for me to be better next time around, regardless of how people view the album.
Yeah, but I also think it's really creatively healthy to realize that, or to be able to start over, or to have just a blank canvas and start building, and not to force yourself to, or to limit yourself with certain elements.
I agree, and I think like that's a good point raised because like my whole thing is like how can I clear the canvas completely and start again? And I often think about like critics and album reviews, and I think you know it's you kind of have to just disregard them sometimes
Mm,
because if they're good, then you're going to try and record the same album again. But if they're bad, you might have recorded a really good album that you know some dickhead has just like said something terrible about, and you know it might put you off, and you might just like completely run away from that. But you know you might have actually done something really good. So like the main thing is just like I think stick to your guns and you know go with the gut and yeah, I think it's always good to just like start from square one again. I think all the best artists just, you know, were great at doing left turns. You think of like Joni Mitchell, Paul
mm,
McCartney, like I don't know, like Prince, Todd Rundgren.
Bowie, yeah.
Oh, like Bowie, exactly. Yeah, these people always like shapeshifted, which is I think really important. Even Rush, you know. There you go.
No, I definitely agree with you. May I thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Hey, no, thank you. That was such a sick chat. Thank you.